As someone who has seen Mike and Katie in the last few years, I can testify that Mike is doing these things. As somebody who employs Mike, I also want to testify that Mike's been doing these things, you know? It's like, we don't have time for your 1 minute pause, okay, bro? 2 straight weeks. He has just feel proud of the decisions that they've made. He made a joke of it, but they could have taken a walk, and they decided to remain in this flock and work this out with us. So thanks, guys. My name's Travis. I'm the guy on the team who cries. That's my job. Carl, that is true. Carl and I together, we cry. It was this time last year that we were hosting a conference on prayer and prophecy. And I think this last year was probably a good year for our prayer lives. This year was not a great year for prophecy. I don't want to be sent another YouTube video for the rest of my life. It was all kind of used and abused in a way that didn't build up the church or point us to Jesus. And Sam Poe pointed this out to us yesterday. It just was not a good year for the prophetic. However, what I'm about to share with you today out of 1 Samuel 30, you can turn there now, but what I'm about to share today came to me by way of a prophetic word. I was kind of vaguely familiar with this story about David because he strengthens himself in the Lord in this passage. That was the part of the story that I remembered. But my friend who's here, Danny Bartlett, phoned me when I was facing a fair amount of criticism and really a lack of just camaraderie, and shared 1 Samuel 30, man, it's for you. It's David at Ziklag, you know, and I'm like, David at Ziklag? I don't even know that story. So I've been stewing on I've been living into this prophetic word for the last 6 months, and what I'm about to share with you is just kind of what's occurred for me as I've spent time in this. And this word brought tremendous direction to my year, brought language to some of the groanings I was feeling, and I'm hoping that it'll help you as well. I have a sense that it wasn't just for me, but that it was for us. So I want to share it kind of broadly today. So I also want to start by saying we need the prophetic. We should eagerly and earnestly still, I don't care how many YouTube videos you got sent last year, we should eagerly and earnestly desire spiritual gifts, especially the gift of prophecy. I don't care how it was used or abused, let's continue to go after this. There's nothing quite like it. And this word's been life to me. So 1 Samuel chapter 30. Now David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day. The Amalekites had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters were taken captive. And then David and the people who were with him raised their voices until they wept, until they had no more strength to weep. This is David coming from a fight to a fight. He's fighting on one front with his men. He thinks he's returning home to rest and to be rejuvenated and to do the 20 things that Mike lined out. And he goes from fighting on one front to just fighting on another front. What a great description of the year that we just had. I heard someone say it wasn't a marathon. It didn't just involve endurance. It was a triathlon. It was like swim for 2 miles and then someone hands you a bike. And it's like, ride this with wet shorts until you get a rash. And then run a marathon. When you hop off the bike, just run a marathon. And it just was like, it wasn't just that we were doing the same thing over and over again. What we were doing was changing, and it was exhausting. And here's this picture of David and his men. They've got no more strength to weep. They've got no more strength to push liquid from their face. They're numb, right? Then it says in verse 5, David's 2 wives also had been taken captive, and Preston Sprinkle, he's coming, and he'll explain why David had 2 wives. There's a Q&A actually on the last day with Preston, and you can ask, how come David had so many ladies? Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail. Again, Preston Sprinkle's coming. He'll sound these names out for you. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. His troops are upset at the loss. They're despairing, and so they turn on their leader and begin to throw stones at David. And as a leader, I am used to taking some shots. I'm not good at taking shots, but I'm used to taking some shots. I'm used to getting some emails. I'm not good at those emails, but I'm used to getting those emails. And I think it's really good to count the cost and know that if you're going to be a leader, you're going to be criticized. You're going to get some emails, right? I was really shocked this year by who was throwing the stones. These weren't outsiders who didn't understand what we were doing or why we were doing it. These were partners. These were maybe mighty men and women at the core of our church. And at points this year, I just wanted to scream like, same team, man. And I think what was so painful about this year was that I think we found out that we weren't actually on the same team with people that we thought we were on the same team with, and it made this year really difficult to find out that we're in different places with people that we thought maybe we had more alignment with. I might just be talking as a Californian today. Maybe that wasn't the case in your church, but I don't think that that's true. Chicago. And here's the famous text. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Now, David is consistently for me, and I'm sure consistently for us, a picture of courage and a picture of trust. That's how he's introduced to us in Scripture, and that's what he remains for us, this picture of courage and trust. And I spent a good amount of the year wondering what courage and trust, what they should look like. You know, at times I thought it looked like defying the governor's orders, let us worship. At other times I wondered if it meant speaking up. At times I wondered if it looked like remaining silent. At times I thought it was to fight the power. At other times I thought actually it would be quite a witness to our watching world to actually submit to what our governor had put forth in front of us. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what it might look like to be courageous, because I was called a coward more this year than maybe any other year. I don't know if that was your experience as well. So I just thought, I'll show you, I will do something. There's just this huge temptation to puff out your chest during this year. So what follows here is, I think, a beautiful picture of what courage and trust look like. David strengthened himself in the Lord. David inquired of the Lord. And David pursued what God asked him to pursue. Let me read on. Verse 7. And David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought the ephod to David, and David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I pursue after this band, and shall I overtake them?" And the Lord answered him, "Pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue." So David set out, and the 600 men who were with him. And they came to the brook of Besor, where those who were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men. 200 stayed back. They were too exhausted to cross the brook. David strengthened himself in the Lord. And often when I think about strengthening myself in anything, I think about getting active. I think about exercising. I think of doing, right? I think of working. That's how we strengthen ourselves in something. But I think the theme has been here today, as with what Andrew shared and with what we've sung. And I'm finding out that strengthening myself in the Lord involves me waiting on the Lord, which turns out is just as painful as exercise. But it's in the waiting, as we wait on him, we're strengthened in the Lord. And there were those times for all of us this year where we waited on him and we were strengthened. Now, there were times where I was waiting on the governor and I was not strengthened in that. There were times where I was waiting on consensus in my church and I was not strengthened. There were times where I was, waiting on a virus or waiting on a vaccine, and I was not strengthened. But the times when I was genuinely waiting on the Lord, I was strengthened in him. It says here that he inquired of the Lord. And I think this is incredible. My wife and kids get hauled off, and I'm not asking God, should I pursue? It's incredibly courageous to inquire, to ask, and then to be open to God's response. And there was far too little of this in the last year. Really coming before God and really asking questions. Holy Spirit, search me and know me. See if there's a racist bone in me. Like really. Genuinely asking the question and genuinely open to God's response around our mistrust of authority, around our rebellion, around the kind of disciple that our church is producing. These were difficult questions to really ask and then really be open to God's response. I bought an RV in September, and I didn't tell my wife. We had talked about getting an RV, but then I bought an RV, and I came home. I was like, I bought an RV. She said, is this a joke? I was like, no, I bought that RV. I didn't inquire. I didn't inquire, not because I'm the head of my house, that's for sure. I didn't inquire because I was a coward. I knew what she would say. And I knew I probably didn't have a good response for it. And I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and that was to buy an RV and leave California as quickly as possible. That's my last California joke. I blessed the state of California with my mouth. What if God would have said no? Would he have stayed? Was he really open to God's response? Was he genuinely asking the question? Or was David going to do what David wanted to do, which I'm sure was to pursue immediately, to take back what had been taken from him? If he had not heard from God, this is what I think. If he had not heard from God, yeah, go ahead, pursue. That word is used 3 times, by the way. Pursue, pursue, pursue. And I want to say this quickly. You can't assume that everything you lost in the last year you should pursue. You need to come before God and genuinely ask the question, what would you have me pursue? I would encourage your teams to not assume that you're supposed to go get everything that was taken from you, but to really ask and really do the hard work of coming to that place of surrender. Here's what I think. If David had not heard from God concerning pursuing what had been taken from him, I don't think he could have continued when he found out that he was going without a third of his troops. Had he not heard from God when that number drops from 600 to 400, I don't know if he continues to press the gas. Because maybe he's still looking for consensus. We're going forward. Most of us are going forward with, I think, 2/3 of our church. I haven't traveled a lot in the last year, but there's been a little travel in my year. And there seems to be this sense that we are missing 1/3 of our churches. I know that's the case for us. This almost exactly pencils out. We are missing 200 people. They're, I guess, too exhausted. I used to think we've got to get to them. We've got to find them. And then as the year went on, I found out, oh, they don't want to be found. Surely you're not getting our emails. No, we're getting your emails. We don't want to go. Oh, wow. I guess I'll take these 400 people and go. David, out of gas, pursued. David, who had gone from one fight to the next, he pursued. And he pursued what God asked him to pursue. Let's keep reading. They found an Egyptian in the open country, and they brought him to David, and they gave him bread, and he ate, and they gave him water to drink. They gave him a piece of cake, figs, 2 clusters of raisins. can I get some water? I got thirsty right when I was reading that. Can I get, not, this isn't a joke. I'm not trying to be funny. Can I get some water? Raisin cakes? Do you guys have raisin cakes? Thanks. Thank you, guys. So he got water to drink, and his spirit was revived, for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. And David said to him, "To whom do you belong, and where are you coming from?" And he said, "I'm a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We had made a raid against the Negeb," right? "And against that which belongs to Judah, and against the Negeb of Caleb, and we actually burned Ziklag with fire." And David says to him, "You're exactly the scumbag I was looking for. I'm going to burn you to the ground." No, David said, "Will you take me down to this band?" And he said, "Swear to me by God that you'll not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I'll take you down to this band." And again, what a picture of courage as David restores the person that had caused him great harm, who had brought so much trouble to him. Here David feeds him, restores him, and then uses him to lead them to kind of raid and rescue their families. This is so interesting, and I guess I just want to, this is a bit of a stretch probably in the story. Those who've been swept up in movements and mobs will be left for dead not very many days from now. We will find them, those who've been swept up in mobs and movements. We will find them sick, starved, and left for dead not many days from now. These groups on the left and the right, they will not care for their wounded. They'll be left. The wounded, those that slow them down, those that don't go along, will be left for dead. They'll leave behind those who fall behind, and those who slow the momentum of their movement, question the momentum of their movement, will be left. I have never seen quite the legalism that I'm witnessing right now. I've never seen something so graceless in my entire life. Crushing legalism. And I don't care what side. The woke left, the white nationalist, I don't care. Crushing legalism on both sides. If you slow us down or question what we're doing, we will leave you behind, which sets us up as a group of people who have heard Terry Virgo's teaching on grace more than a few times. It really sets us up to win. Will we care for the wounded? Will we care for those who caused us harm? Will we restore those who got swept up in mobs and in movements? Will we extend grace to them? The grace that their movements failed to extend. This is a great question again to ask with your team. How will we as leaders tend to those that we find days from now sick, starved, and left for dead, malnourished? This is what's so cool. As we restore those who were formerly our enemies, as we receive them and restore them into our community, they become our inroad into those movements and into those mobs. This is what made Paul such an effective missionary. He knew the way people thought. Keep reading with me and we'll finish. Verse 16, and when he had taken him down, behold, they were spread abroad all over the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. And David struck them down from twilight until evening of the next day. And not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. And David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken, and David rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that had been taken. David brought back all. David also captured all the flocks and herds, and the people drove the livestock before him and said, "This is David's spoil." And then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow David and who had been left at the brook of Besor. And they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near to the people, he greeted them. And then all the wicked and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, "Because they didn't go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we've recovered, except that each man may lead his wife and his children and then just get out of here." But David said, "You shall not do so, my brothers, with what the Lord has given us. He has preserved us and given into our hand the band that came against us. Who would listen to you in this matter? For as his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike." And he made it a statute and a rule for Israel from that day forward to this day. Here's the last portrait in this passage of what I think real courage looks like. It looks like refusing to withhold from those who refuse to go. From the 200 who refused to go with us. 1/3 of our church went missing. I hope that they show back up. And this is what I think is going to happen. They're actually going to come back embarrassed, covered in shame, that they didn't go with us when we needed them most. We'll come back enjoying the spoils, the things that the Lord's added to us this year, and there'll be many that didn't go with us. And we'll be forced with a decision. Do we operate as the older brother? It's so fascinating to me that those who are described as wicked and worthless in this passage are not those who stayed back, but those who fought and then refused to share the spoils. And there's that older brother in me, and I know there's that older brother in you, right? And I have felt tempted not to share what's been added to us with those who went missing from us when we needed them most. We started gathering again at our church about 6 weeks ago, and it's just been so good to see people. It's been a real joy, just like it is good to see people here and a real joy to see people here, right? But it's been also really tempting to withhold. I've not said it out loud, but there's something in me that's like, look who decides to show up. Now that the coast is clear, now that we can gather again, now that there's momentum, oh, I'm glad that you showed up, right? I haven't seen you in ages. I've been here working double time, crushed by the weight of responsibility, being stoned by my own men, working somewhere between 60, 80 hours a week. And I'm so glad you took up gardening. I'm so glad you had time with your family. That's great. I hope to have some of that too when I leave in my RV and never come back. And then you're going to miss me. And you're going to be sorry you treated me this way. I've just noticed a little bit. I've just noticed some resentment growing in me, man. That's all. Courage is waiting. That's what it is. And I just, courage is inquiring, like asking these big questions. Courage is pursuing when you feel out of gas and the Lord asks you to pursue. And courage is refusing to withhold from those who didn't go with us, right? And I know you're probably thinking, Trav, like I'm too hurt to do these things. Or I guess then the question becomes, where does the strength come from to do these things? It feels so easy to withhold. It feels so easy to resent. It feels so easy to be impatient in this time. It's too easy to not ask the questions. Where does the strength come from to do these things? Couple things. Worship team, would you guys come? A couple things. The first is this. This is where the strength comes from to do this. You have to see yourself not as David in this story and not as the 400 mighty men. You have to see yourself as the 200 in this story if you're going to have grace for the 200 in your church. When I first was given this word by Danny, I was like, yeah, I'm David, man. And then I sat with it a little longer and I'm like, wow, I'm not David, but I'm definitely in the 400, man. I fought hard. And then as I sat with it longer, I just thought, I'm in the 200. I am. I didn't cross the creek. Jesus, you waited. Jesus, you inquired, and you were open to everything the Father would say, even if he said death on a cross. Jesus, you rescued. Jesus, you won a victory that we could not win. And then you didn't snub us with the spoils, but you shared with those who stopped short. I stopped at the creek. I threw stones at you for your leadership. How come you don't lead differently than you do? We're not the 400. We're the 200. And when we get in touch with that, really in touch with that, we've got something to give the 200. And when they come back embarrassed and afraid, we've got something that we can extend to them because we've received those spoils. He's shared his spoils with us. The other thing I feel like the Lord would want to do to us, with us in our ministry time is I just believe that the kindness of the Lord would come and affirm us. And I kind of hate when he does this. I like a challenge. And often I can have a hard time receiving encouragement from brothers and sisters and also from the Lord himself. But I feel that the Lord would say over us, well done. I thought it was so right for Ian to start this conference. Well done. Some of you waited in some incredibly painful situations while wolves came in and destroyed your flock and you felt powerless to do anything about it. And you were just waiting in incredible pain, not knowing what to do, but genuinely waiting on the Lord, asking him for your next steps. And I feel like he would want to affirm you. I also feel like the Lord would say, thanks for asking good questions. Tough questions. Thanks for inquiring. Thanks for caring for the flock when it was so tempting to hunker down. Save yourself. You extended yourself. Thanks for dealing with wolves. Thanks for guarding the flock. I feel that the Lord would say, thanks for pursuing those folks who wounded you. Thanks for going after them. With the little strength that you had, you pursued. And I wasn't there. I didn't see it, but I sensed that the Lord's saying, I see you. And that mattered to me. Your care for the flock. And thanks for being willing to go forward with the few that are still with you. Thanks for not focusing on the third that are missing, but taking the 2/3 that are probably left in your congregation and going forward. Thanks, Matt and Heather, for going forward. Would you stand with me? Felt like it was right to just pray for one another. You might not be here with a large team, but I do feel like it would be right to encourage one another, pray for one another. This year there was enough in the account to get Christmas bonuses, and I got a Christmas bonus this year. But the real bonus was Mike. I'm not a big money guy. I don't feel very motivated by money. Thankful for it, but Mike, he was like, hey, look, like, I know a Christmas bonus came your way, and I know you're not a money guy, but I just want to tell you, man, like, you're deserving of anything that would come your way. Because I've watched you work this year. And I just want to say I appreciate your effort, and I see what's been going on. And again, I know you're not here with a large team, but you're probably here with a few people who know more about your year than I do. And I feel like it would be right just to affirm, to say what we see. If it's positive and we think it, you have to say it. That's kind of the rule that I'm trying to live by. But to kind of recognize what people have invested, and to bless what you've seen come from their lives, and to encourage one another. So Mike will be up here praying for people, but I would love to just pray over us, but then release you to say what you see over your table. And it doesn't have to be profound, but just, I think a lot of what has happened this year has been unseen. And I feel like it's right to kind of recognize, verbalize, and bless those around us. So, Jesus, we are excited about what's ahead, but I don't want to move forward and just ignore our losses. I don't want to pretend like, well, I'm glad that's over, and then have these injuries haunt us as we go forward. And so I just want to ask, Holy Spirit, that you would search us, that you would know us, see if there's anything that needs to shift in us, Lord. Who would you have us pursue? What would you have us pursue? What would you want to say over us? Thank you, Jesus, for not minimizing our losses, but acknowledging them. Thank you for the healing that comes when you can identify with the betrayal that we feel and the hurt that we're wrestling with. I just ask right now, Jesus, that you would draw near and tend to your flock.